Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today I'm going to be doing the Get to Know My Taste tag. This is an original tag that was created by Samantha at Thoughts on Tomes and by Mari at My Name is Mariness. I was tagged 4 times on this tag. I was tagged by Mark at TheBookThing, by Leslie at booksgurrsandpurrs, by Reney at Books and Beyond, and by Joe at Joe's Book and Movie Corner. So it's high time I got around to doing this tag. First question is, how do you rate books? Give a quick rundown on how you do your star ratings, or if you don't use star ratings, how you evaluate books. I don't use star ratings. I'm not on Goodreads. I read a book. I think about the book. I write about the book. I will probably make a video about the book. I talk with others. I compare it to other things that I've read. But it's an involved process. But I don't do number ratings or star ratings. I just feel like that. I can't do justice to my feelings about a book with that kind of a rating. Number 2, how do you approach reviewing books? What is your review style? Are you analytical, emotional, casual, or structured? I think I'm probably very analytical, and I'm also very emotional. I mean, I certainly know what I like and what I love, and I know what I don't. But I think my approach to literature is also analytical, and that comes from a lifetime of reading and writing about literature and teaching literature. I don't tend to do rants. If I really don't like a book, I'm not likely to come on and do a negative review, which is not to say that I only say glowing things about books. I think that you can be a critical reader and an analytical reader and say what works and what doesn't work for you in a book without going off on a rant. And I certainly don't review books that I DNF'd or a book that I've never read. I have more than once been upset by videos that I've watched where people have gone off on rants about books that they hadn't read yet. That doesn't hold a lot of I don't think that kind of a review holds a lot of weight. Number 3, what's the book that made you a reader? Whether it was your first favorite or the one that got you hooked, what book started it all? I think there are a few, and I'm only going to talk about books that I read in my childhood here. But these were the early books that told me that I was a reader. When I was 8 years old, I read for the first time Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, and this is an abridged edition. This is the edition that I read from. My mother bought this for me when I was 8 years old, and it is inscribed by her in the inside cover. It was the summer I was 8 years old. This was my mother's favorite book as a child, and she wanted me to read it, and I read it, all by myself. I read it on my own. She didn't read it to me, and I think this told me, and I think it told my mother, I was going to be a serious reader. I also read series when I was a kid. When I was a little kid, the first series that I read was the Bobbsey Twin series, and I still have about 15 of these from my childhood. I just brought down a couple here, the Bobbsey Twins and The Secret of Candy Castle, and the Bobbsey Twins, The Secret at the Seashore. These were 2 that I remember loving, and I've talked about this recently in another video. I was devastated when I learned that Laura Lee Hope, it was not a real person, that all of the Bobbsey twin books and the Hardy Boys books, which I also read. I read my brother's Hardy Boys books, and also the Nancy Drew books, which I read a little bit later on. That all of those were written by a whole group of authors who worked for the Stratemeyer Syndicate. And, they just had a formula that they were following. And I just remember as a kid just being really sad to learn that these were not, individual real authors. It was a whole office full of authors somewhere that was, churning out these books. That was very upsetting to me somehow. But I couldn't stop reading those. I read the Bobbsey twins, I read the Hardy Boys, I read Nancy Drew, and this summer I'm going to be revisiting Nancy Drew. Roy at Roy Reads Anything and I are going to be reading a little bit of Nancy Drew together next month because, believe it or not, we discovered that the girl detective who is probably the model for Nancy Drew actually appears in James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. It all comes back to Finnegan's Wake. So we're going to read a little Nancy Drew together next month. So those were all, books that I read at like 8 years old that told me that I was a reader. When I was 9 years old, I discovered Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird on my parents' shelf. I've told this story many times, and I couldn't stop reading this book, and something in me changed when I read this book. And because I had older brothers and I was free to read from their bookshelves as well as my parents' bookshelves, I discovered S.E. Hinton through my oldest brother. And I didn't discover The Outsiders first. The first book that I read by S.E. Hinton was That Was Then, This Is Now. And I was still in elementary school when I discovered this and read this book. And then I went from this one. The next one I read was The Outsiders. But I didn't discover S.E. Hinton with The Outsiders. So those were my pre-junior high school books that told me and probably told my parents that I was a reader. Okay. Number 4, do you have a genre niche? Are there certain genres you gravitate toward, or do you read widely across genres? I think I do read widely. I think I read very widely and even more widely since I've been on BookTube this last 15 months or so, because I just keep joining every event that sounds interesting to me, and I'm tapping into things I didn't even know I was interested in. But if I had to say what my sort of go-to genres are, I guess they would be contemporary literary fiction, classics, and poetry. But in the last 2 years or so, I've become a very serious reader of science fiction as well. I've barely scratched the surface, but it's a genre I read regularly now. And, I'm so late to the party. I've got so much to catch up on, but I'm working on it. Okay. Number 5, do you generally prefer character-driven or plot-driven stories? I have trouble sort of dividing those two because I'm interested in both, but I think I'm probably most interested in character analysis. So I would say that's probably the most important thing, but plot's very important too. Number 6, what's a book you love so much that you don't care if others don't like it? What's that one book you love enough for everyone? Well, it's not just me alone. Angelia and I love The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger enough for everyone. I can't say that I don't care, though, if somebody tells me that they hate this book, because I think I do care a little, like just a little. Something in my heart, hurts a little bit when somebody tells me that they hated that book. But I think Angelia and I, who talk about this book as frequently as we possibly can, we probably do love it enough for everyone. Okay, number 7. This is similar to that. What's a book you love so much that if someone doesn't like it, you know your reading tastes don't align? I couldn't think of just one for that besides The Catcher in the Rye, but I was thinking of a number of things in contemporary fiction. These are books that just mean a great deal to me, that moved me powerfully, that I couldn't stop talking about when I read them. And if somebody tells me that they read, any of these 3 books and they really didn't like it or couldn't finish it or, thought it was dull or boring or whatever, I think that we're probably on very different wavelengths. And that would be The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, who is one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite contemporary authors. Susie Boyd's Loved and Missed, which I read. I had not even heard about this book, and I read it last year when I was judging the BookTube Awards. I think I read this in the 2nd round, and this book just moved me like few books have moved me in my recent life. And then one I've talked about a whole bunch, which I learned about also through BookTube, and that's Ronan Hession's Leonard and Hungry Paul, contemporary Irish writer. And I heard people talking about this on BookTube, but I was reading this because I was reading all things Irish for a while there in preparation for my trip, and that was when I first heard about Ronan Hession, and then I read this as a buddy read with my friend Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. But I think if somebody has read any of these 3 and says that it really just doesn't work for them, I think that our tastes probably are not aligned. Okay, number 8. What's in your trash pocket? I didn't know what that meant. What books, tropes, or themes that what are books, tropes, or themes that you know are bad, but you love them anyway? I couldn't think of anything for this. First, I didn't know what trash pocket meant, but then even with the explanation, I don't think I have any books that I love that I know are bad. I mean, I don't know. I watched some other people's videos to see what they talked about for that. I just couldn't think of anything for that. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. Is there anything I've talked about in any of my videos that you would say, that's bad literature? I don't know. That's not even a phrase I use. Okay. So, sorry. Couldn't do that one. Okay, number 9. Do you have any deal breakers in books? Something that, if present, immediately turns you off from a book? Yes. I have real difficulty reading about violence, especially against children, animals, women. I can't read about cruelty to children, especially. I mean, I almost couldn't get through The Brothers Karamazov because of one chapter that, was just, a character talking about some other characters and some horrific things that were done to their child. And I almost couldn't move on with the book. So I would say those issues are hard for me to read, especially gratuitous violence against anyone. I have very little patience with language that is demeaning to women or to any other group. I'm very aware that books are written of their time, or maybe depicting a particular time. I get that, but there is some fiction that's just very sexist, I would say, and that older fiction that can be hard to get through. Number 10, what's a strong opinion you have about a book released within the last year? whether it's overrated, underrated, or just a take you need to share. Well, this is a book that is certainly not underrated, and I also wouldn't call it overrated, but it's a book that I think we need to be reading and we need to be talking about, and I've been talking about it since I first read it, and that's Percival Everett's James. And it is certainly getting lots of attention. National Book Award winner, Pulitzer Prize winner. This book is getting lots and lots of attention. Percival Everett probably should have been getting a lot of attention all along, but I just think this is that important of a novel that I think we need to be reading it. I want it to be taught in schools. I want people to keep talking about this. I feel like I can't talk about it enough. Okay. Number 11, what do you look for in writing? What makes a book stand out to you? Is it prose style, themes, voice, structure, or something else? Well, style is certainly important to me. I mean, I do appreciate well-written fiction. Prose style is very important. The themes that a book is dealing with are very important to me. Character is very important to me. I think those are the things that I look at. Character, theme, what is this author trying to say, and how is it written? What is the style like? I'm a fan of well-written fiction. Number 12, how do you decide what to read next? Do you plan ahead, mood read, or follow external factors, hype, recommendations, arcs, etc.? Well, I'm in a book group, so that determines what I read each month because we choose something new every month. I participate in a lot of BookTube reading events, so that determines often what I'm going to be reading for, in any given month. I watch a lot of BookTube channels, and I pay attention to what my friends are reading. I take recommendations from people. So I absolutely plan ahead. Far ahead. Now that I've been doing this for a while, I realize that my months are very planned, and I don't do enough mood reading, and that is something I would like to do more of, and I have to make room for that. I have to not overextend myself, so that there is room to just pick something up because I want to read it. Okay, number 13, where do you get inspiration for your BookTube content? What sparks your video ideas? Other creators, trends, personal reading experiences? Well, other creators, certainly. I pay a lot of attention to what my friends are doing. I get lots of great ideas from booktubers that I admire. I do have, just regular things that I do. Poetry Thursday is something that I do, and I heard about that when I first joined BookTube, but I don't think I really got that from anybody. I don't think I was really watching anybody's Poetry Thursday videos. I just maybe Aaron Facer. I think I watched some of Steve Donahue's. I think maybe that's how I learned that this was a thing. And that's something I've done consistently, and some people I think have, other people have started to do that recently too, which absolutely delights me. Trends, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm too susceptible to trends. Personal reading experiences, absolutely. There are the set things that I do every week. There are, usually 3 regular things that you can kind of expect from me. I am a creature of habit, but sometimes something just moves me that I've read and I feel like I have to talk about it, or something that has happened in life and I feel like I have to talk about it. So I guess from all over the place, but largely from other creators. Okay. Number 14. If you could make any book go viral right now, what would it be? A book you think deserves more attention and why? A couple of weeks ago, I saw the most incredible video on my friend Dave's channel, and that's Dave and Olive at Book Blather. And Dave did this absolutely brilliant review of a book that was written in 2018, and it's called How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them, and it's by Jason Stanley. Jason Stanley was a philosophy professor at Yale University. He has now left Yale, and he has taken his family and he's moved to Canada, or he is in the process of doing that, and he's going to be teaching at the University of Toronto, I think starting next year. I'm going to put a link to Dave's video in my notes below because you need to see Dave's review. I bought the book based on his review. I've just started reading it. It's incredibly readable and accessible to the layperson, who doesn't read a lot of philosophy or political science, and I can't emphasize enough how important this book is. Again, it was written in 2018. It was written before our current situation, but I can't think of any book right now that I'm reading or that I have read recently that I think is as important. And I want everybody to read this book. I want everybody, regardless of their political affiliation, to read this book. And I want us to be talking about it. So that's a book that I hope does go viral. Number 15. Who are some booktubers with reading tastes similar to yours? Angelia at Read and Reread, the first booktuber I ever discovered. We have very similar reading tastes. Kim at Middle of the Book March. We have very similar interests in the classics that we both like, and we also did the Pinero project together and discovered some, we have a lot in common in terms of what we like to read. Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. Alan and I have a lot of reading tastes in common, but the big one is our love of all things related to Irish literature. Melinda at A Web of Stories. I think we have classics in common, and we have similar tastes in contemporary fiction. Brian, the Bookish Texan. I always look to Brian to see what he's talking about in terms of contemporary fiction. He never steers me wrong. Nicole at Noteworthy Fiction. I think we have very similar tastes, and I think some of the classics that we both have loved. We have similar tastes in the classics. Roz at Scally Dandling About the Books. I think we have very, very similar interests, both in contemporary fiction and in British English fiction. And I get lots of good ideas from Roz. And Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads. Greg and I think, initially thought that we don't have reading tastes in common at all. And yet Greg and I are continually in reading groups together on books that we both have chosen to read. And, we seem to have very similar reactions to the books that we choose. and these are particularly classics. But Greg has also been doing this wonderful series where he's talking about books. He's responding to these videos that have been out there about, whether there are books for men being written. So he's been doing a couple of books at a time and talking about whether these would be good books for men, or would they be good books for women, or would they be good books for both. And he's done a couple of these videos, and they're really fun and funny. I'll try to put a link to at least one of them in my notes below. But I keep coming out on having almost the exact same responses as Greg. The ones that he says yes he would read are ones that I'm saying yes I would read. The ones that he says hell no, I'm pretty much saying the same thing, and it's just been really fun. To see our choices coming down together, and we think that it might also have something to do with age, and where we are in life. And Debs at Rainer Reads Stuff. Debs and I have, Debs reads much more widely than I do. She reads everything. I don't think there's a genre that Debs doesn't read. So I don't read all of the things that Debs reads, but we have many things that we read in common, and we keep finding ourselves also in the same reading events and in the same discussion groups. So I think we have similar tastes as well. I'm sure there are many, many others, but those were the ones that came to the top of my head. And then the last prompt is to tag others. Well, anybody I've mentioned in this video, you are tagged, and you've probably been tagged on this already. This has been around for a while, and obviously I've been tagged so many times on this that I've lost track of who has done it and who has even been tagged. But if I mentioned you, you're tagged. If you would like to do this, please consider yourself tagged. And in addition, I'm going to tag some other people as well. I'll put their names in the notes below. So this was a really, really interesting tag. I really enjoyed doing this one. So thank you to all of these people who have tagged me on this. And thank you, Samantha and Mari, for creating this tag. So that's it for today. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.